Hi, I'm Chris Colvin. I'm the host of GCtv, which is a monthly interview program with leading general counsel where we ask them about their career and also seek advice they have for other in-house counsel or other legal professionals who would like to know how to succeed in the in-house legal world or who want to know more about what general counsel do. I'm also the founder of In the House, which is a organization with the mission of empowering in-house counsel to succeed through education, thought leadership, professional networking, and other opportunities. You can learn more about In the House at www.inthehouse.org. I'm delighted today to have as our guest Ed Burns, who's the General Counsel of Wheel Pros, LLC, which is the world's leading producer of aftermarket wheels for the automotive industry. Ed, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you as well. So why don't we start out just by telling our audience a little bit about your company and a little bit about your role at the company.
So Wheel Pros LLC is the largest aftermarket automotive wheel distributor and manufacturer in the world. It was started about 22 or 3 years ago. It's based out of Denver. We have warehouses. We have 30 warehouses in North America, one in Australia, and we do business all over the world. My role is to oversee all of the legal affairs of Wheel Pros, which can involve anything from employee issues to patent infringement in China and beyond.
So Ed, could you tell us just a bit about your background as an attorney and also about your current company, Wheel Pros LLC, and about the work you do for them?
Sure. So I've been in general civil litigation practice for 20 years. I got involved with a company called American Racing very early on in my career and did some patent litigation for them and got involved in some of their licensing. And then over the years, they've acquired companies, and then Wheel Pros acquired them. Wheel Pros is now the largest aftermarket automotive distributor and manufacturer in the world, and they own numerous brands: XD, KMC, Asante, Motegi Racing, American Racing. And so I've done work in the aftermarket automotive industry for, like I said, the last 20 years. About 7 years ago, I became kind of their Wheel Pros outside general counsel, which is kind of what your organization helps attorneys like me find those types of clients. But I kind of found them and was lucky. And then as they grew, my role in the company changed, and I went from just handling some lawsuits and giving guidance to really a GC role. And then last year, we kind of made the decision. They have grown so much, they needed someone full time. And I was spending all of my time on their projects anyway. So it just kind of was a natural fit for me to go in-house with them.
Well, congratulations. That sounds like a real win-win for you and the company.
Yeah, it's been a great relationship.
So having spent a number of years as an outside lawyer and now working as a general counsel, what have you found to be the best thing about being a general counsel?
Well, the best thing for me is just the ability to focus on the needs of one client. So you don't have, to always wear these different hats. So you can kind of really understand the client, the company, where it's going, and give, advice really tailored to that.
Right. And how about what are some challenges that you've found as a general counsel that maybe you weren't as aware of when you were an outside lawyer?
Well, I think the challenges are, and I think you find this anyway, people assume that since you're a lawyer, you know everything about the law everywhere, all of the time. And so there's kind of no limit to the questions you get asked as a general counsel. And so you have to, be able to deal with those and have the resources and know who to go find.
Did mentors play any role in your career, either as a lawyer at a law firm or later as you transitioned from part-time to full-time general counsel?
Yeah, I had a very good mentor the first 15 years of my practice who was I had a really good trial lawyer. And so we tried a lot of cases together. And so one of the things I found is by trying cases, you really understand, you know, kind of where your case, where things are headed, and some of the challenges, because, you know, trials don't always get at the accurate truth, right? There's what the plaintiff says, what the defendant says, and then what the jury thinks, and then there's what actually happened, right? So I think, you know, in every jury trial, you learn lessons, and you certainly can apply those lessons and educate your client better, so they you know, can avoid having their fate put in the hands of a jury.
Right. Now, I've sometimes told clients in my career that what a legal right is in many ways is just a ticket into court. And you need to think about the way we enforce rights in our legal system is by going to court. And if you know how that works, you can kind of back up from there and really learn a lot and give a client a lot of great advice. So I think it's probably true to say that a lot of general counsel have more of a general corporate background. It's a little less common, at least in my own experience, to have a GC with a litigation background. So what have you found that having a litigation background brings to your role as a GC?
Well, I think you're more aware of the pitfalls, right? It's easy if you've, you know, never, you know, been in front of a jury or litigated a case, to armchair quarterback some of these problems and some of these issues. But for me, understanding the practical reality and where it could go bad, and, you know, and also controlling outside counsel that you hire to litigate or give advice. For me, I found that, you know, the things I've litigated, which are business disputes, contracts, patents, employment issues, you know, your perspective's very different when you come from a, hey, this is what 12 people are going to think about your practice,
right,
terminating people. That's very different than somebody writing a employment manual, having never tried an employment case.
Right, that makes sense. So what's that transition been like from being an outside counsel for probably the majority of your career, and now you're hiring and managing outside counsel? Could you describe what that experience has been like, and how you've learned to handle outside counsel?
Yeah, so you know, I want outside counsel who are like me, right? I want them to understand the business. I don't want the client to be just viewed as a sack of money that you're going to get your billable hours in. I want value. You know, I want to know that I can call and rely on you for good advice. And I'm not, every time there's a phone call or an email, I'm not getting some crazy bill, or, you know, or I'm just getting general legal advice that isn't really helpful to our company and how we're growing, or what we're doing in that particular state or country.
Staying on that point for a minute, do you have any advice to any partners at law firms that might be watching about how maybe they could make themselves into providing better service for the GCs and other in-house counsel they deal with?
Well, I think really, you know, and from my perspective and my experience has been, I go spend time with the client. So and it's not particularly difficult in the automotive industry, right? We sponsor races, so it's not hard to get motivated to go to the Indy 500 or the Long Beach Grand Prix or something like that, or even the SEMA show out in Vegas. But if your client has an interesting industry, or there's a trade show, you know, go to it with the view of getting to know your client. And the clients appreciate when you go and you attend these events that are important to the client, you know, and it's not a billable event. So, for example, my trademark attorney, my patent attorney, and I have a litigator that we use in some patent infringement cases that come to Vegas every year on their own dime to attend the big SEMA show. You know, it really helps them give us good advice. And as a result, they get a lot of business from me.
Right. It's basic advice, but very good advice is really contributing non-billable hours to building that client relationship. I think that's excellent advice. And what's SEMA for those people who are not familiar with it?
That's Specialty Equipment Manufacturers Association.
Okay.
It's an aftermarket, big aftermarket automotive.
Got it. Okay. Could you describe, I think some of our viewers, one thing I've noticed, I've been in the legal field over 20 years as well, and I think there's sometimes some ignorance about what general counsel actually do on the job. I think one thing that I often advise lawyers I know is to think of general counsel as professionals in their own right and not as sources of billable hours for law firms. So to that end, what is a typical day in your own experience? What is a typical day like for a general counsel?
Oof. So since I deal with a lot of foreign entities, I'll get emails early in the morning because of the different time zones. We do a lot of business in Australia and China. So I'll get emails from foreign counsel in the morning that involve trademark renewals, patent renewals. Maybe there's an issue. For example, we did a raid last week in Shanghai. So, I'll get an update on that. And then our headquarters are a couple of time zones ahead of me. So the CEO, the president will start calling me and asking about, maybe there's I just did a distribution agreement or a manufacturing agreement, with a company in India. So they want to know about that. And then, as my time zone kind of wakes up, I'll deal with local HR issues. Maybe the manager from our local warehouse has an issue. And then there's a lot of compliance issues we have to deal with. And when you contract with some of these bigger entities, they require you to join, like, for example, the UN Global Compact, and you have to file reports. That's what I was working on this morning, is a report to the UN Global Compact. And then you have to comply with environmental laws in Europe and Prop 65 in California. I mean, these are very typical things. And then, I have ongoing litigation in California and China and Texas and a few other places that I'll manage. And some of it I'm actively involved in. I myself just got out of a 3.5-week jury trial. So.
And so that leads me to another question is, as the general counsel of a fast-growing company, how do you figure out what to do in-house and what to send to outside counsel? Have you developed any sort of rules of thumb that you like to use for when to hire a law firm and what to try to do yourself internally?
I'm figuring that out. And some of it are painful lessons that you think you can do things on your own, and you realize, man, it requires more resources and time than I really have. So, like, for example, in my jury trial, it wasn't an issue, but I did have to bring in outside support for some of the motion work and some of the behind the scenes things that you need to do while you're in trial. So that will probably be my last trial, just because the time that was consumed, and it went fine, but the time that it took was just extraordinary. And I think the resources are better spent managing and doing the other things, that I need to do as general counsel. So, litigation is certainly, I don't recommend it for general counsel. I think that's fraught with peril. But, most of the contracts and licenses and that kind of thing, we handle in-house without issue.
So if you could contrast what are some of the things that you find are very different about being a general counsel than about being a partner at a law firm, both in terms of your lifestyle as well as sort of how you manage day to day?
Well, you're judged differently, right? So I'm not judged on a billable hour. And coming from a litigation background, that stuff's there's always deadlines, right? So something's always on fire. So I would say, as a general counsel, it's the pace can be nicer. It's not always, right? Because there's certainly timelines and everything, and you have to get back to people. But I would say it's definitely not as pressure cooker environment. And it's, people are calling you, asking you for advice, asking you to review contracts. But it's not, you're not going to get sanctioned by a judge. You're not, you don't have the other side screaming at you about discovery responses or whatever. So from that standpoint, I would say the pace is much more manageable.
And have you, in your time as a GC, both as, first of all, as an outside general counsel, then as a full-time GC, are there any work habits that you've acquired that help you keep abreast of all these issues that are coming at you and help you succeed on the job?
Well, just from the standpoint of, part of it's delegation. So there's one other team member in my legal department who is part-time, but she's super valuable. So it's figuring out everybody who's going to do what, and, make sure you don't step over. And a great example is this morning, I answered an email that's normally within her bailiwick. And of course I caused a bunch of confusion. So I had to slap myself on the nose and stay in your own lane. I thought I was being helpful. I was trying to be helpful, right? But I was a dummy. So it was, I think that, and I think just being, generally responsive, which I think is a good habit anyway to any client. So if the CEO or the president calls or emails, you get back to them right away and let them know that, hey, you've seen it. You'll take care of it. But I think that's a good habit for outside counsel for any client, right? I mean, you ignore your clients and you'll lose your clients.
So as someone who runs an organization for in-house lawyers, I get several calls a week from law firm lawyers that are looking to make a transition in-house, one that you've done successfully. Do you have any advice for lawyers like that who might feel like they've had enough of law firm life and would like to explore in-house opportunities? What would you suggest that they start doing, and how would they go about making that transition, both literally in terms of getting a job and also habits they might want to develop and ways they might want to interact with their clients in order to prepare for that kind of transition?
I think it's important to identify the type of organization you'd like to work for. So I was very fortunate. I had a client that I enjoy the work, I enjoy the people, I enjoy the industry. So that makes my life so much better. If I went to go work for in-house for some big, tech company, I would probably be absolutely miserable because I'm not a techie, right? So I would say, so I think the industry is important, right? What you choose. It's easy to say, oh, I want to be house counsel. Those guys seem like they have the life. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think you need to find an environment where you're comfortable, that you know the people. I think from my perspective and the people that I've met, the most successful GCs have transitioned from a law firm to a client they've had for a long time. They're comfortable with, they understand the business. I mean, if you're just answering an ad in the Daily Journal for, hey, we need general legal counsel for some company you've never represented or an industry you've never been in, that's a recipe for failure, in my opinion. I think, to become a GC is a great opportunity. And so why not make it a great opportunity in an area or a practice that you're going to enjoy, that you're going to be, you're going to have a company that you're going to have fun with and people that you're going to like. And I mean, it's the same as any other job, because they're going to rely on them. They're going to look at you different. You're the lawyer. They're going to really count on you for your advice. And if you don't understand their business, then you're not going to give them a good advice, and it's just going to be bad.
So have you always been a car guy, or is this something you picked up by having clients in the automotive industry?
I've always kind of been a car guy. I mean, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, which is the ground zero for hot rods and all of that. So I always was around hot rods and cars and that kind of stuff. I can't say that I'm a car techie. I can kind of work on cars, and then I was fortunate enough to pick up this. My firm had the client, when I was a young lawyer. And so I just made sure that I did good work, and that when the client needed something, they felt comfortable calling or emailing me. And then I tried to show up when they had events, and then it's paid off.
Right.
It takes a long time. It's taken 20 years, right? So.
But it's great advice, given that you're doing something for 20 years and hopefully much longer. It's good to pick an industry that you like and relate to. And that, I'm sure, gives you more credibility with the C-suite, because presumably there's a lot of car people in your company.
Right, right.
So one of the things we try to encourage it in the house is innovation, not only technology innovation, but also encouraging both in-house counsel and attorneys at law firms to think differently about how they approach the attorney-client relationship and the sort of business model of how to work most efficiently for a client. And with that as a backdrop, if you had a magic wand and you could magically change something about the way law firms provide legal services, what are the types of things that you would wish for?
Well, and again, I think this goes back to getting to know your client, right? I think the broad range of actions you can take on any legal matter, whether it's writing a contract or litigating, you can write a very one-sided contract for your client. Is that always in your client's best interest? It may not. They might be trying to build a relationship with one of their suppliers or vendors where they want it to be much more neutral, certainly at the beginning. So if you can understand that, in other words, if I contracted with somebody to write a supply agreement and it came back to me very one-sided in my client's favor, and I send that off, that's going to cause my supplier to incur additional legal expense, because their lawyers are going to say, hey, we want this to be more neutral. It's going to come back, and then I'm going to spend more money having my outside counsel look at it. And it's not always just a billable event. So it's not about winning every single point. It's really about what's in the client's best interest over a period of time, over the long run.
Yeah, that's really great advice for partners at law firms. On an even broader level, a piece of advice that I sometimes give partners at law firms is to ask their client, as they're retained, or if it could be a long-time client or a brand new client, either way, what this matter that you just hired me for, what is your business objective here? What are you trying to achieve as a company, so that I can make sure that my legal advice fits into that objective, both from the perspective of how many billable hours we should be looking at, as well as making sure that I'm not doing things that could be contrary to that objective, such as want to maintain a great relationship with a long-term supplier. You don't want to suddenly drop on them a very one-sided agreement. So do you find, and my question for you is, do you find that most law firms pay attention to the business objectives of the client, and do they do so often enough and regularly enough for you?
The ones I hire, yes. and I've fired plenty that don't seem to get on board with the whole, hey, I need everybody in the canoe paddling in the same direction.
Right.
Right. And so, and you find it with foreign counsel quite a bit, especially if if they're far away. But I've been able to build really good relationships with attorneys in Australia. And sometimes, cheaper isn't better, right? Sometimes
Right.
it's you got to pay for good service sometimes. And so I find that will be worth it if they're giving good service.
Right.
So, my foreign counsel understands that, hey, I want a personal relationship. I want you to understand our business. I don't want you just billing me for every time you think about one of my files.
Right. That's great advice as well. Let's talk about technology a little bit. I know you said you're not a quote unquote tech guy, although you do have a patent background, so you must be somewhat tech savvy. Have you found any particular technology that has been helpful? And this could even be as an outside lawyer or as a GC. And what sort of tech hacks, if you will, or technology have you found useful in your own practice?
Well, we're starting to use a like a brand management software, an outside company that has brand management, and that they can search uh, thousands of social media and e-commerce platforms for infringing goods. Um, that were, I think those kinds of things are helpful. We used to do that on our own, but as the e-commerce platforms expand and the social media sites expand, especially worldwide, it's impossible. You can't do it. And so we're currently using Yellow IP brand protection, which
Okay.
would be pretty good. They've been very helpful. And then that's we also have a database for our trademarks that follows the renewals and that kind of stuff. But beyond that, it's been just general whatever the company uses, SAP and some other programs.
Right. Any advice you have for specifically for legal tech firms that are developing new products and want to better serve legal departments? What advice would you give companies like that want to know how to do business with legal departments and to serve GCs like you?
Yeah, I think you really, again, need to spend time and understand how your product fits into the needs of a specific company. I don't know. It's very difficult. I would say, again, attend events or get to know, sponsor in the house, right? So you can find these guys. It's because
Exactly.
again, it's relationships. I mean, I get cold calls all the time from people who want to sell me technology and all this stuff, and I just I, I'm like, no, no, no. I don't see any value in their elevator speech, right? So
Right.
you're going to have to hook me, right? I mean, so the and that's what the yellow guys did, quite frankly. Is I was at a conference and they were there, and we were kind of talking about it, and so I've given them a very small, part of one of the brands, and it could expand.
Great.
You're not going to get the whole, Magilla in one swoop. So maybe you put it in a smaller bite size. Hey, here's one piece of our technology that can help you in this area. Give us a shot. Give us a try. As opposed to trying to sell a whole package for all of my brands for, $50,000 a month. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Probably not in the budget either especially if it hasn't been proven.
Right.
That's
Right.
great advice. So we've talked a little bit about how you interact with law firms, how you interact with technology firms. What are some of the things that you do to network with fellow in-house counsel, fellow GCs, and do you have any tips for successful networking with your peers?
I haven't done too much of that recently, in part because I've been in trial and I haven't even been at Wheel Pros as General Counsel for a year. But there are organizations out there to join that have newsletters and have helpful events. Your organization has been great. There's been some benchmarking and some other studies that have come out. Uh, Also, I will tell you that I have used a couple of the um, lawyers that I met through in the house on specific projects in states. I've reached out to several of them in different states and gotten, if they couldn't help me, they got me to somebody who could
Right.
help in that state. So, I mean, you've been a great resource from that perspective.
Well, thank you. That's music to my ears. I do think I think of in-house lawyers as not just important peers in their own right, but they're usually a gateway to local law firms or to specialty law firms.
Absolutely.
And, that's when I network. I always think that I'm not really there representing myself. I might be, but more likely, somebody I meet might not have any need for what the expertise I have, but there's a very good chance they might have need for the hundreds of lawyers in my own personal network. So I try to think, well, what can I offer to the folks I'm meeting with? So I think that's a really helpful perspective. And thanks for your kind words about In the House. That's our goal, is to really empower in-house counsel in large part by helping you access each other. I noticed, early in my legal career, that when people went in-house, they sometimes would stop networking and thinking, oh, I don't need to develop business anymore. I won't go to any more networking events. But I actually find that in-house lawyers can be extremely helpful to help find outside counsel or even to get referrals for technology. And, often more and more these days, you're not necessarily with one company your whole career. And it's become a matter of usually when, not if, you're going to move. And it's good to have a soft landing. It's really helpful to know folks at other companies I found, and people in my network have found. So let's think a little bit about the future, if we can. As you look at sort of the changes in the economy and the changes in the legal services industry, what are some of the big challenges that you think you and other GCs will be facing in the next 5 or 10 years?
I think, certainly every day the world becomes more and more of a single global economy where, uh, it's really more and more difficult for even the smallest country to be completely segregated and and to believe that it has no impact on, you know, what we're doing here. So I think um, paying attention to those issues is certainly uh, important. I think artificial intelligence is coming at a rate that I don't think people are prepared for. I think the jury's still out of how it's going to impact the legal community, but certainly there's a line of thought that it will replace lawyers in many situations. I don't think it can completely, but certainly, everybody's going to have to be prepared to deal with those types of issues that the artificial intelligence is going to create. Privacy is huge,
Yes.
especially as we get more electronic. Uh, you know, Europe has stricter and stricter privacy laws that you got to comply with. The U.S. and all these places. So, as a general counsel, you're going to have to make sure that your company is prepared to um, be in line with that technology. It's easy to say, oh, I'm not a techie, but the reality is if you're not aware of it and understand what's coming, you'll be blown by and your company will make a mistake and pretty soon you'll be, uh, you know, hauled into court on privacy violations, and that's expensive and not fun.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. I mean, we have a working group dedicated to cybersecurity issues, and one of the things that we've really learned over the last year as we met in that group is that maybe one of the biggest danger zones in cybersecurity, for lawyers at least, is that gap that you can have between the legal department and the CTO or the IT department. And there shouldn't be a gap. In fact, there should be overlap. So lawyers should be more tech savvy. Tech people should know at least enough about the law so that they're covering those gaps and really bridging those gaps. And I think that's really great advice. And I agree with you that cybersecurity is just going to become more and more important, actually, frankly, to both individuals at home on their home devices and their phones, and also at work. So you've given some really great advice to our viewers. Maybe I'll turn that around a little bit and ask you, what's some of the best career advice that you've gotten, whether it's as an outside lawyer or as a GC?
Well, I think it's really been to be yourself. I think that's very important because you're going to find clients that like you for who you are. Um, as opposed to maybe inheriting a client from a partner who's retiring that you don't necessarily like, but is a good billable client. Uh, those relationships are very difficult. You certainly want to be yourself and develop clients that you enjoy. And one of the things that I've done, even before, as outside general counsel is, and this is going back to your comment about the tech people. I get to know everybody in the company, from the guys in the warehouse to the tech people to the CEO. I think you need to form relationships with all of them for a variety of reasons. One, it makes you credible. It makes you understand the company, and it makes you see where the problems are. But again, part of that is, you got to be yourself. You got to go develop these relationships.
Right.
And if you're not enjoying that component of it, probably not a good match.
Yeah. That is such excellent advice, just to walk the halls, get to know people outside of the legal group, or if you're in the C-suite, outside of the C-suite, because, everyone has a role there at the company. And the more you know, I really think the better off you are. And it's fun to get out and talk to people other than other lawyers. So it's nice to get those other perspectives. If there's any bad advice that you've ever gotten that you would, no attribution, please, but have you ever gotten any really bad advice that you did not benefit from?
I personally haven't, but I do know people who have failed to either leave a job or even take the leap to go out on their own because they're just too hooked to the paycheck. And I think I've seen a lot of people really squander good opportunities by not believing in themselves to take the leap to go to that next step. And I think, you can't be afraid to recognize it, and you can't be afraid to do it, or you'll just be stuck on the wheel, and the wheel of misery and billable hours and whatever else is, the issue causing you pain.
Right. That's such good advice, because life, if you don't get a little outside your comfort zone, life can get dull. And what thing that people forget is everyone was there at some point, right? No one's born knowing everything. No one was born a general counsel, to use a pertinent example.
Right.
You really do have to put yourself out there and learn. And I've even talked with Fortune 500 GCs who told me that the first day on the job, they were absolutely terrified, and they
Sure.
didn't
Oh yeah.
they didn't know what EBITDA was, and other things like that is
Right.
part of corporate speak. And that's an adjustment. But I think people that are smart enough to have gotten through law school and succeeded at law firms, they can do this job. They just need to
sure.
have faith in themselves, and importantly, build a network. So when you have those quote unquote stupid questions, not that you ever do, but many of us do, and it's good to have
We
someone
all
to
do.
call. We all do, right? Exactly. So
we all do, and which is nice. Which is one of the reasons to network with other GCs, right? Because somebody in your circle will have had that situation before.
absolutely, you don't have to reinvent that wheel, and especially when you're not being paid by the hour, you're being paid a fixed income. It's really good to tap into your network and not reinvent that wheel every day, and talk to people who've been there. And then, you can return the favor. Like if there's an IP related question, you'd be a great guy to call for other GCs, but, or litigation related. So thank you so much for your time today. I think you provide a lot of great insight to both fellow GCs and in-house counsel and outside counsel as well. So any last thoughts you have that you'd like to share with our audience, either about your career, your company, any other advice you have for people out there who would like to be GCs?
Again, go find some place that fits you. And I think that's the best advice I can give, and be patient, because it doesn't just magically happen.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Ed. Thank you for doing this interview and for your involvement within the house. You've been a real great member of the community, and I look forward to continuing to interact with you in
Thank you
all
very
our
much, Chris.
activities. Okay.
You have a great day.
Thank you. You too.